Oh, welcome back to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri, and you loved our next guest on The Newsroom, Life in Pieces, and now you can see Thomas Sadoski in the new Edie Falco show on CBS. Tommy, everybody put your hands together for Thomas Sadoski. The show title, not to be confused with your name,
Indeed,
obviously.
not to be confused with me, although that did create...
How many people do that?
There was a lot of problems on set every day. It was like, would somebody please, like, you know, we need makeup for Tommy, and then like 10 people would run on stage and they start dusting somebody. You know, like it was.
Do people call you Tommy?
They do, yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then that was actually
It was
confusing.
legitimately problematic. Yeah, no, that wasn't like a made up story. That was like it held up time on a regular basis. I need to change my name because they're not going to change the name of the series. They've invested too much money in it now.
First and foremost, what is it like working with the Gaud Edie Falco?
I mean, you pretty much just said it. She's incredible, man. I mean, when you talk about wanting to work with a person who really sets the pace, you know, for a cast, but also for everybody else in the room. I mean, it's kind of hard to be an asshole when the person who's in charge of the show, who's doing the most work on the show, is so down to earth and so kind and so gracious and so, you know, it just sets everybody in line and everything just flows so smoothly because of her. We had the same sort of experience on The Newsroom with Daniels. You know, when the person who is right up there at the top really knows their job and is a good person, a kind person, and is as talented as Edie is, it just makes everybody's job easier.
Right, they're not screaming like, "Can I get a minute?"
Oh
or
my
anything
God,
like
no.
that. Yeah.
No. If anything, you know, she's asking us, you know, do you want another take? Or people, you know, how you feeling? What's up? You know, she's checking on us all the time. And everyone, but at the same time, like, trusts us, you know, like, it's great. It's just great. I had so much fun working on this show. And I really hope that we get to keep doing it because she's phenomenal.
You know, at this point, you've been on multiple shows, some for multiple seasons, some for one or two seasons.
Mm-hmm.
But I get the impression that your first love is doing theater in New York City.
Yeah.
Do you ever, what does it take to get you on a show? Because oftentimes that could take you away from doing theater. Debt, okay.
Debt.
That's the answer I was looking for. Not sure if it was the one I was going to get.
No, I don't immediately rush in front of the camera unless I'm genuinely excited to be part of something. Or feel like I'm going to learn something by challenging myself to be, you know, by being a part of it. Like with Life in Pieces, I never imagined myself doing a half-hour comedy for CBS. Never. That was never in the cards for me. And then when they called and said, listen, Diane Wiest is going to play your mom, and, you know, Betsy Brandt and Colin Hanks, and like they started listing all these amazing people, and I was like, you know, I would be dumb not to try. I mean, I may not feel comfortable with it, but that's not a good reason. You know, that's actually the worst reason, is because I don't feel comfortable with it. I'm not sure I'm any good at it. Man, just go and try it. And particularly when you're working with people like that, you're going to learn. And that was sort of the same thing with this show. I had no intention of coming back to network television. None. After Life in Pieces, I was like, you know, okay, cool. I'm going to go see what else is out there. And I really have all intentions in the world of just like going and burying myself back in the New York theater community. And then they called.
You did White Noise for Cecil Parks, right? And,
yeah.
And was there some other stuff in between as well that you did? Some other plays in between?
No, I mean, I did some stuff up at the Williamstown Theater Festival that then transferred down here. There's a show on Broadway right now called Grand Horizons that I originated up at Williamstown, and then there was another show called Moscow.
The Ali Pfeiffer show.
Yeah, the Ali Pfeiffer show that started up at Williamstown that I did that came down here, and I wasn't able to come down with either one of those shows for various different shooting reasons, but. You know, that's ultimately like where my heart lies, you know. And then White Noise was, you know, they call up and they say Susan Laurie Parks, and that's pretty much the end of the conversation.
Yeah, you can't really say, I saw that show, and you can't say no to that show as an actor.
I mean, you'd be foolish to. Yes. I think that there probably were people who did, you know, and there will be people who will say no to that show. Particularly the part that I played, because I think people are genuinely afraid of sort of being seen that way. For those of you who don't know what the play is, the part I got to play was a guy who starts out as your sort of, I mean, it's sort of like the birth of the Proud Boys, frankly. It was like, you know, your typical sort of Brooklyn hipster, proto left-wing guy who very slowly, because of this deal that he makes with his black best friend, sort of, before you know it, has become this European chauvinist, racist freak show, and
Discovers his inner fascist.
yeah, indeed, and like I think there are a lot of actors who would be absolutely terrified of being seen in that part and in that way. I was not, and I had one of the greatest artistic experiences of my life, and I think that it was, if not the most important piece of theater that was being done around here in the last few years, it was certainly amongst them.
Was it, obviously we're talking about Tommy, so I don't want to talk about White Noise too long, but I didn't get to talk to you about it when you put it up. Was it difficult for you on a nightly basis to play that character? Is the writing so good, your collaborators are so great that it's a really mostly satisfying, fruitful experience at the end of a show? It
was exhausting.
Yeah.
It was absolutely exhausting. It was exhausting spiritually, it was exhausting intellectually, it was exhausting physically. Because I had Oscar Eustis directed it, and he put together such an incredibly safe room. And I know that that's a term that gets, sort of thrown around, unfortunately, but because it is something, particularly when it comes to creating art, that is invaluable, is having a safe space to fail, but also having a safe space in which to ask questions. So I don't use it as a pejorative. It was important for us to be able to sit down and have very difficult conversations that are essential to have, not only amongst artists, but as a country. We were having those discussions in the room, and we had the space and the time to do it. And because of that, the bond that we all had as a cast and as a creative team and as a unit really sort of bolstered everybody going out there and doing it every night. I'm hesitant to complain too much because nothing that I went through was even remotely close to what Daveed Diggs had to go through. Yeah. In as much as it was exhausting for me, what I saw that man do every single day, 8 shows a week was it was superhuman, and he was absolutely brilliant. And I think that might be one of the greatest performances I've ever been present for. He was a level of courage and dedication and grace that I think you rarely ever see. And it's shocking to me that there weren't lines all the way down the block to see him in it. I think that probably actually speaks to the importance of the piece, that people were scared of it.
Oh, I would agree completely. I mean, not because it is about racial tension, but that's my kind of theater piece that I want to be confronted and I want to be challenged. But
He left you no place to hide.
Yeah, but I don't think that the majority of people engage with art in that way, unfortunately.
No.
Yeah. When you go and do something like Tommy, obviously you're working with Edie Falco. You have incredible collaborators on this show as well. But is one of the things that you miss between theater and doing television are long-winded conversations about character, about dialogue, about what things mean? Because you don't really have time for that. On a show.
Yes, and Paul Attanasio, who is the creator of this, who wrote Donnie Brasco and Quiz Show, among a whole career full of extraordinary work that he's put together. Paul called me up, and Tom St. Georgi, who one of the producers who runs the show and head writer, we had the best sort of creative conversations that I've ever had in film, dealing with this character, figuring out where we were going to go, how we were going to build it, what they were looking for, what I was interested in doing with it, where I thought I could put my sort of take in to fit what they were looking for. Was that going to gel? All that sort of stuff. And
what is your take on him?
I'm still sort of figuring that out, but ultimately I thought what's most interesting, I think, when you're watching a character is that you don't have any sort of grip on them. The instant...
Especially a politician.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's... Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, I say this respectfully, but most politicians, you can get a pretty quick grip on them, and what they're all about is power.
Yes.
They just want their job, and that's it. And a lot of the other stuff, regardless of party and affiliation, whatever, is frankly, it's bullshit.
I agree with you, but a politician as a character is someone, especially someone like this.
Politician as a caricature, yeah. But
No.
my interest in doing this was any moment that you sort of get into that place of politician, that he does something or takes something a certain way or goes in a direction where you go, what? You can't lock him down. You can't lock him down as this corrupt politician. You can't lock him down as this sort of smartest. There's something always going on. He always seems to be sort of one step ahead of anyone else who's in the room, not only in the way he's operating, but in the way that he's trying to figure out if he's going to be a person of integrity or not. And like that, to me, is an interesting story to watch.
I would argue that that is the ideal politician in a way, in the sense that they have ideology, they have ideals, they want to do the right thing,
Sure.
but they also have to be an operator, and they have to work within the bounds of whatever city or government that they're in the midst of. And so therefore they're constantly making compromises and maybe doing slippery things, but in the back of their head there is this sense of trying to maintain integrity. I don't know if that exists in reality, but it's a great character.
It's certainly an ideal.
Yes.
It's something to be devoutly wished, you know. I don't know if it exists either. I mean, I think that they try to tell us that that's who they are. Yeah. I think that there are legitimately some people who are out there working in that way, but I think that the integrity word is one that doesn't really fly in politics too much these days. And again, I say that as on both sides of the fence.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Did you look at anyone in particular when you were thinking about this character?
Are you talking about Eric Garcetti, the current mayor of Los Angeles?
No, I am not. But I was wondering if you were...
People have sort of said, like, is this based on Garcetti? And I just say, that. Like, poor Mr. Garcetti, no. You know, I didn't take any of this. I based none of this character on Eric Garcetti, who I actually think is a really good guy. And I think he's done as good a job as you possibly can, being the mayor of a city of 4 million people that is constantly figuring out who and what it is. And I didn't base any of this on him. I was sort of more interested, rarely have I like taken people from real life and based characters on them. I've found limited success with that, frankly. Like I sort of feel like what ends up happening is I start doing impressions and I'm horrible at them. And it drives me a real, I'm not talented enough to be able to like put that on top of the other work that I'm trying to do, being honest and tell a story clearly. You know what I mean? Like there are some people who are able, like Daniel Day-Lewis, who are able to, or Charlize Theron, who are able to just like completely transform themselves into these, you know, different human beings and are walking and talking. You would never know that they weren't, you know, a completely different soul that's out there. I wish I was that good. I'm not.
You operate from the idea of like, how do I make this character like myself? What would I do in these particular, how would I respond?
No. Not quite.
I'll ride through this interview being wrong the whole time.
Because when you do that, then art becomes self-referential. And I don't have any interest in art as therapy. You know, as me performing art therapy in front of people who have paid money. Like, that's not interesting to me either.
Did you ever?
No.
It's like a young actor's thing.
That was sort of beaten out of me at a very early age. You know, I was told really, like, right from the jump, like, this is not therapy. People are not here to watch you figure that stuff out. If you're playing a heroin addict, you don't actually have to be a heroin addict. That's just self-indulgent bullshit.
Where did you learn that?
I went to Circle in the Square Theater School, but I had the great pleasure of studying with like some really talented people before I ever went to theater school in my little town in Texas, where I grew up, and that was sort of hammered in very early on. And then it was just something that I picked up along the way, you know, that it just made more sense to me that way. I think that there's sort of you know, my family are all working class, and I'm really proud of that fact. And there is sort of a working class ethos to that idea of like, spare us the bullshit, just do, you know, let's get to the truth. And that, I think I always sort of carried into it. You know, I grew up really interested in punk rock and that stuff. And again, it was like 3 chords and the truth. Like, all right, let's get away from all of the like 7-minute guitar solos and like get into what we're really talking about here. And
what do you do when you're, and obviously no names mentioned, I can't even think of who it might be, when you're on set with someone who their process is more in line with what we're talking, not with what you do?
I mean, you know, I am respectful of every artist's space. It doesn't work for me. I'm happy to play along up until a certain point. When we walk off set and we're heading back to our trailers or whatever, and you need to stay in character, that's cool. You can stay in character over there, particularly if our characters have animus. You know what I mean? But like, if we walk off set and you're bringing me that shit while I'm trying to go have a bagel, I'm not going to get along with you. You know what I mean? Like there's a boundary there where I'm like, now this is just getting crazy. I mean,
Just eat my bagel, man.
yeah, like no, but seriously, like at a certain point, it starts to become borderline, psychotic, and like I don't really have patience for that. Like you go do your crazy thing over there, and I'll do my.
You also can't really have patience for that in the theater, because in the theater during the rehearsal space, there are you have to be able to go in and out so you can talk about what you're doing while you're doing it, right?
Yeah, one would hope. I mean, I've seen some of that too, and it's exhausting. It doesn't make for a particularly fair or open room. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't. It like I said, it's wildly self-indulgent and has a way of like sucking all of the oxygen out of the room. We work ultimately in a collaborative art form, regardless of what medium you're in. If it's theater, if it's television, if it's film, whatever it is, we're collaborators, and the idea when we're at our best, and the idea is for like the best idea in the room to win. If you have one person sort of sucking all the oxygen out of the room because they're so invested in their process and they need to stay in character as whoever it is that they're playing, that it takes time and energy and focus away from other artists trying to do their work, and I don't have patience for that.
And eventually, it's not going to be productive for that person because they're going to be
good luck telling them that.
Asked to leave the room while everybody else actually shares ideas and comes up with ideas for things to do.
You're right.
I imagine you've experienced that too, where it's been kind of like, great. Do you want to go get coffee? And we'll keep talking about this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at a certain point, it's sort of like, all right, put the tornado in the corner.
Yeah.
And like we'll just sort of be over here actually deconstructing this piece of theater that was written by this amazing artist that all these other people have given their time for very little money to participate in, that we would like to bring to this audience of people who, are showing up to connect to something human. That's not something human. That's you. Right. That's you having your experience. That's not us. We're not talking about us now. We're talking about you, watching layers of you, and like that's just so boring.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
It's exhausting, yeah. And I don't get it. Like I want to go home and like play with my kid too. At the end of the day, you know what I mean? Like I don't have the energy. I'm too old.
So how did Tommy come about? Did they call you, Paul Attanasio, call you and say, this is something that we want you to do? And then did you guys kind of come up with this character's backstory together? I haven't seen past the first couple episodes, but there's not much revealed about the mayor at that.
Yeah, well, we built a lot of it on our own. You know what I mean? And my understanding is that Edie and Paul and some of the people over there got together and said, well, this is the guy we want. They called me. I said, Edie, yeah, sure, anything for Edie.
Had you worked with Edie before?
Yeah, we did a play together. I don't even know how many years ago. We did House of Blue Leaves on Broadway with Ben Stiller and Jennifer Jason Leigh and Christopher Abbott and Allison Pill. I mean, we had like a murderer's row of a cast. It was insane. Hallie Pfeiffer, like walking around backstage every night was just. It was a dream, every door you knocked on, it was like some other incredible badass would open it up and be like, hey, you're like, break a leg, all right, break a leg,
I bet all people who interacted the way that you're talking want.
Yeah. Generous, actors generous to a fault. So generous that we were problematic. You know what I mean? Like Stiller and I couldn't keep from laughing. Like we were just corpsing each other on stage every night because we're both listening to each other so intently. And like we would see something in the other person's eye that would be new or whatever, or just the sort of ridiculousness of the situation would hit. And one of us that twinkle would hit, done, laughing. Like just pissing ourselves laughing upstage, like, oh God, these people paid so much money for these tickets. I can't stop laughing right now. But yeah, so I'd worked with Edie before. They called up, said, we want you to do this. And I said, great. They called me, said, this is who this guy does. Well, this is what he does for a living. He's the mayor of Los Angeles. We're not entirely sure if he's there through the most ethical means, what do you think? And I said, great, let's play with that. Let's see if this is a person in search of integrity who's trying to, shed the snakeskin of his past. And
oh, right, like the character in the pilot who was a donor of some kind.
Yeah.
He has to,
Yeah, and like that tracks throughout the course of the season. The sort of great thing about the show is that in as much as it is like it's a cop drama writ large, in sort of that sense, meaning that we deal with crime in the city of Los Angeles. But every week there's sort of a different challenge that she's dealing with, each episode pulls from those challenges pieces of a larger story that you're tracking throughout the course of the season, that, you know, we then turn, and hopefully if we get a second season out of it, we'll continue on into the second season and we continue to pay big, huge dividends. But it's tracking that inner life and who each of these people are sort of behind the scenes, as well as what they do on a day-to-day basis is the bulk of what the show is, and it's fascinating. It's kind of like, the way I've been saying is it's like the best parts of Law and Order meet The West Wing. You know, there's a lot of walk and talks. The dialogue is really great. It's all about like the actual governing and policing of the city from inside the sheriff's office and inside the mayor's office. The characters are not all cops. They're like speechwriters and, the PR people and the mayor and the deputy mayor and, her bodyguard. And, it's, and then her life, her actual, life outside of work, with her daughter and her granddaughter and the life she's trying to negotiate, as a human being. There's a ton of stuff in it. It's really thick, and frankly, it's kind of exciting for network TV.
Yeah. You back to theater for just a second.
Sure.
We were talking about this before we started. Can we talk a little bit about what we were talking about before we started? The play that you're up to. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to. You're directing a play.
I am.
Yeah.
I'm directing. I'll be directing a play. We're going up at MCC, which is sort of like the new crown jewel of off Broadway. Their beautiful new space up on 52nd Street. In June, I think we start performances. It's called Perry Street. It's a new play by the tremendous Lucy Thurber, who wrote Transfers, which was an exquisite look at class and race in the education system in America. This play is about class and race in the relationship between artists and benefactors. And frankly, like what and who you're willing to sacrifice in order to get what you want, what you most desire. We just finished casting this morning. I don't think I'm allowed to. I'm almost positive I'm not allowed to say.
Forgive me for not knowing. Is this your first time directing?
Yeah. This will be my first time directing a full production. I mean, I've done a lot of workshops and stuff before. This is my first time directing a full production.
How's it feel?
I'm having a blast so far, man. I mean, I put together. I'm sort of embarrassed, like at the sort of great people I was able to like call together to help me out with this. Our design team is insane. I kind of pretty much got everybody I asked for. I was like, they were like, put together your dream list of people who, you would want to design this thing. I said, oh, okay, yeah, like I'm never going to get these people. And they all said yes. Wow. My job's going to be pretty easy, frankly. I don't know what they're paying me for.
Do you have rules for yourself as a director, or things that you've learned over the course of your career that can you say what some of them are?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know anything. I don't know anything more than anybody else. The best idea in the room always wins. It doesn't matter who it comes from. Diversity of opinion and diversity of people in a room is invaluable, and it is a must.
Can I ask you, not to interrupt, how do you present yourself as, I don't know anything, the best idea in the room wins, while still at the same time presenting yourself as sort of in charge and on top of everything that is happening around you? Because I've seen people be able to do that in a way, and other people, they have to basically be a dictator in a way, otherwise they don't really know how to function.
I think that ultimately it comes down to, I'm not trying to put my thumb on the scale of anything. Right? I'm trying to express the play as the playwright has written it. Particularly because it's a new play and the playwright will be in the room. That is, that's the most important thing. If I were doing Shakespeare or, Tennessee Williams or O'Neill or somebody who had gone before and wanted to do a new take on it, that might be a different thing. I may actually be willing to sort of dismiss things or say no a little bit quicker. But that still, for me, would be quite a distance from, I want to hear ideas. I want to shuffle things out because I know that I'm not seeing everything from every angle. I'm acutely aware of it, And so I'm not trying to like, this is my version of this play. I don't, as a director, frankly, I don't want them to see me. I don't want the audience to see my thumbprint on this anywhere. I truly believe that theater is a playwright and an actor's medium. The director is there to sort of like to bring all the threads together into, whatever sort of pattern it happens to take and put it out for an audience to digest. Film director's medium, television, advertiser's medium. But, although that's changing now with the streaming services, which is really exciting. But for me, the thing that makes theater so important and so valuable and so essential, and I mean that like in terms of like the essence of why I do this and why I need to constantly go back to it, is because it is a playwright and an actor's medium, and it's a communion between playwright, actor, and audience. And if I stick myself in the middle of that, I break up that communion, and then I don't understand what the purpose is.
But is your job not to sort of stick yourself in the middle of that, not in a disruptive way, but be the mediator between the two?
No, I can't be a mediator between actor and audience. I can't be a mediator
between actor and playwright.
Between actor and playwright, I can be a mediator of sorts.
Right.
You know what I mean? But also, when you're working with great playwrights, particularly when they're alive, they have the ability to communicate exactly what it is that they're looking for to the actor. Sometimes writers don't necessarily know how to give that information to actors in an actionable way, and that's where I step in, is sort of like a decoder ring, to translate what's being said in theory into what is actable, and give it to the actor in whatever way they each best respond to it. I'm sort of like a walking translator, at any given moment. And that's exciting, and then to work with the other designers, the technical artists who are bringing all of their ideas to bear on the story as well, and just trying to like hone everybody's experience and everybody's ideas into this idea that the playwright sort of has. How can we best serve the playwright's voice? How can we best serve the playwright's intention? And, sort of bringing everyone to the table in a peaceable way and getting a real collaboration done.
Do you find that with great playwrights, I always find when I'm reading a play by a great playwright, it's just very clear immediately on the page how this should be performed and read. Like, for instance, your first part was as an understudy for This Is Our Youth, right?
Yeah, yep.
And This Is Our Youth, I've read that play multiple times, and every time I read it, I've only seen it performed live once. And I actually think when I saw it performed live, I was kind of like, I can't believe they're going in this direction. But when I've read it, I've been sort of like, it is so clear line by line how it's punctuated, how this is supposed to be performed. This just makes sense, every line.
Yeah.
And other great plays are like that as well. But sometimes you read something and it's like, it needs people in a room figuring out exactly what a line means and why it would be said a certain way.
That's really interesting. I don't know that I fully agree. There are writers like Kenny Lonergan who write, and Aaron Sorkin, who write with a very specific pace and a very specific musicality to their work, and that is definitely to be honored. There's a reason they're writing it that way. I know from working with Kenny and Aaron both, like they're choosing every single word for a reason. Most playwrights are. Yeah. And so, there is definitely like everyone's got their own music, and you got to, it's your job to step into the band and play with it. I think there are some really great playwrights who, Mamet does the same thing. There's these the staccato language that he writes. You can't mess with that, because if you do, the play just flies off its axis and becomes something else. It's like
sometimes he flies off his axis and it becomes something else as well.
I mean, yeah, it's one of those situations where separating art and artist is sort of paramount at this point. But that you have to honor the voice, right, that it's written in to a certain extent. And then there are other great playwrights who they're like, really? They throw things out there, and you can go into the room with them and say, Susan Laurie was very different. She had her own very specific musicality that she was writing to, because she's also a musician, and like how the play broke down into beats was really important to her, and she talked us through all of that stuff. And we still had freedom inside of it to make it our own. I think that there are other playwrights who don't necessarily do that. Hallie Pfeiffer is a great example. Great playwright who doesn't necessarily have specific designs on how this line is to be performed. You know what I mean? Like, is genuinely excited to watch you bring something new to it that she wasn't expecting. Honoring her words, but like a new take on it. And when she sees it, she gets so excited. You know, John Guare did that with House of Blue Leaves that we did. Like, you know, that play has been performed countless times in this country. And, you know, when we went into it again, John was thrilled that we were taking sort of a new tack on it. And he wanted to rewrite it. And we were like, you can't rewrite House of Blue Leaves. You know, it's an American classic. What will the high schools do?
Have you ever found, though, that a playwright is as willing to kind of go into the room in rehearsals and say something like, make the words your own, and then let's figure it out together in the way that oftentimes film directors will do?
I mean, I've heard playwrights say, make the words your own.
And they'd be like, stop, no, never mind.
But what they really mean is say the words as I wrote them, but make it seem like you're thinking of them.
So act.
Right. That's where a director comes in to translate.
Right.
You know, a director goes, yeah, I got it. Okay, just do what we hired you to do. You know?
Is that why playwrights don't direct their own plays often?
Maybe so. I think that it's important to. I've worked with a couple of playwrights who directed their own work. Richard Nelson being sort of chief among them.
That's a different.
And he's a different beast entirely. But I, in a weird way, I very much trust Richard to be able to direct his own work, because when we brought questions about the play to Richard, the director, he always had a really great answer, which is, I'll go home and talk to the playwright. And he did. He would leave and come back with all of our questions, and he would have answers to them the next morning. And he was able to very specifically separate his director mind from his playwright mind. I don't know many.
Which Nelson play did you do?
Oh God, I've done a bunch of them. I did The General from New York. I did a gorgeous show of his called Left, which doesn't get nearly as much buzz or production as it should. It's a stunning piece of theater. It's absolutely gorgeous. I've done a bunch of things of his. I just started doing a whole lot of workshops of his. He's started retranslating Chekhov.
Yeah, I saw his Uncle Vanya, Hunter, last year.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I've done a couple of workshops of those, you know, new translations that he's sort of spearheading. And
is the process of, for those who don't know, Richard Nelson does very subtle plays that are very much about sort of watching time pass almost, and
a lot of like eating around the table.
Yeah, and the conflicts are seemingly minor, but something happens in the last act of the play where all of the water in your eyes drains out because you felt like you've just watched people live a life.
Yeah,
it's the most incredible sensation with these plays.
Yeah,
but what is it like going through that? Is the rehearsal process? Is it vastly different than doing something that is a sort of standardly structured performed play?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I did a show of his called Rodney's Wife with David Strathairn, and you know, the whole process of it was Richard just like, and take it down.
Yeah.
And take it down, and take it down, and take it down. You know, and you would come in with these ideas, and boom, you're coming in with, I'm an actor on stage, and there's, you know, 800 seats out there, and I got to hit the back row and
like this is what the scene is about, and I got to hit that line.
Okay, great, and take it down, and take it down, and take it down. And before you knew it, you sort of felt like it was so intimate that it becomes very scary because you feel really, really naked, you know. And as an artist, it's so important that if you're asking your audience to be present and not hide and not sort of retreat to their various different places in their mind or their default sort of places to you know, demand, defend, or distract, it's very, very important that you as an artist are willing to meet them halfway. And with Richard's work, it gets so intimate. Like you said, like it doesn't seem like much, but by the end of the show, you realized you've just watched a whole human life, and the voyeuristic part of your body that so subtly got engaged and then brought you in just clamps shut. You've had this incredible experience, and you do just sort of exhale. Yeah. In this incredible way. He's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. And he directs that way too, where it's just like we're inviting people in, and we're being very brave, and we're doing it in a kind, thoughtful way. And it really does engage a part of you that, you know, say like the years I've worked with Neil LaBute, it works. He comes at it in a completely different way. He asks you to engage in a different way. You know, Neil's not ever going to be somebody who's accused of sort of saying, "Come on in a kind, calm way." You know what I mean? But it works. Both attack the same place in us, and it is just sort of like a tampering down of that sort of need and size that a lot of artists run to in order to kind of hide.
I will say your character in Susan Laurie Park's play felt in some ways like a reference to your work with Neil LaBute, or like a LaBute-esque character.
You know, I'll say this about Neil, and I think that Neil gets for any number of reasons, but specifically, he gets a very, very bad rap.
I find him inspiring, personally.
He's the greatest watcher and mimic of those awful parts of particularly men, white men, and people then therefore think that he is one. Well, anybody who writes them that clearly must actually believe all of this stuff. And it's like, no, actually Neil's the kid in the back of the class who's watching all of these people do all of this stuff and is going, you know what, I'm going to polish this mirror to an absolutely pristine reflection, and I'm going to hold it up. And if you don't recognize that it's you, that's on you. That's not on him. That's on you. And like the fact that he's been doing it for a long, long time and saying, this is the kind of gross excess that this privilege has wrought that's pretty inspiring when you sit down and think about it. Because I know the man, and he couldn't be further from that. Yeah. He's the sweetest, gentlest, biggest, he's just this big, sweet dude. You know what I mean? Who grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and he sort of looks like one of the guys from Screaming Trees. And you're like, oh, Neil, and then he writes these unbelievably crystal clear representations of the worst kind of people that walk around in this world, and they're too real. And there may have been that, we're trampling on the same territory there, you know what I mean? With
echoes, distant echoes.
Distant echoes, for sure, yeah.
We have time for a couple questions from the audience. Who's a question?
Yeah.
Hey.
Hi. I was wondering if you had any memories from Tommy that were particularly memorable while you were filming?
Oh, my God. Yeah, I mean, we always sort of, when Edie walks onto set, she's always so sort of insanely prepared, and I've taken to referring to her as National Treasure Edie Falco. So whenever she would need something done, I would sort of say, excuse me, can we please have hair and makeup for National Treasure Edie Falco? National Treasure Edie Falco would like some coffee, please. Can we make that happen? And she gets so mad at me for doing it, and
but it's true.
It is, but that's just sort of, that's why we love Edie. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, she couldn't hack it. She was like, oh, shut up, and then just Jersey-laden expletives.
Carmela comes out?
Oh, my God, it's thick. But and I also am working with some of my oldest and dearest friends, like Michael Chernus, who's an old New York theater rat who's been in a ton of TV and stuff. The guy's one of my oldest friends. So the first day walking onto set and realizing that Chernus and I were going to be working together was it was just tears of joy. You know what I mean? We have, there's so many throughout the course of a season that you just sort of, you can't keep up with them, particularly from the crew. We had this amazing crew who was just constantly messing with us. I'd be on the phone having these phone conversations, and they'd have somebody reading the lines back to me, and then all of a sudden, I'm talking to my wife, and then all of a sudden some thick, Bronx Teamster would be like, and I love you too, baby. And it was the camera's right there, and you're trying to just keep it together for just long enough to where they can get it out of the edit before you burst into hysterics. It was great. I mean, it's just it's a fun group, and we're constantly sort of having fun with each other. Yeah.
One more?
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering if you learned anything new or interesting about politics or law enforcement from playing this role.
I have so many opinions about politics and law enforcement. I don't know that I necessarily learned a whole lot more. I came out with a lot more questions than I went into it with. It's interesting to sort of be in a show dealing with two sections of our population that are in so that are really under the microscope right now, and rightfully so. And it was sort of really interesting for us to walk that line without hammering anybody over the head with opinion, you know? We don't want to spoon-feed morality to our audience, and I think that that's different than what a lot of people sort of run into. We want to sort of tell the story exactly as it is, with all warts and all, and allow people to really see it for what it is. I mean, our first episode is about the relationship between ICE and the LAPD, and it is unflinching. We tell the real story about how this stuff works, and we don't pull back, but we also don't lean on anything either, because the facts are enough. The facts are enough. They should be anyway. And when you tell them through a human lens, it makes it a lot easier for people to sort of relate to that stuff. So, I didn't dig deep on policing or being a mayor, because like I said, it's sort of half in jest, but really not. People in power are in power for a pretty good reason, because they like being in power. And
it comes with a lot of benefits.
Yeah, like power.
Yeah.
And like and all of the things that power buys you, like cars, which symbolize power, or this, it's all it's ego and power, ego and power, ego and power. And that threads through a lot of other parts of our society too.
Thomas, when can people see Tommy? When does it premiere?
Thursday, tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night,
10/9 Central on CBS, and also CBS All Access. So we are doing it through the streaming service as well. You can watch it on live on TV. And really check it out. I think it stands alone in terms of things that are happening right now on network TV, which is really interesting. I think there's sort of a weird golden age of network TV that's starting to happen. There's some really interesting shows that are happening, Evil and stuff like that, and I think that we're really one of them. And look, you can do a whole hell of a lot worse than spending some time right before you go to sleep watching Edie Falco be incredibly good at her job,
I agree with that. Thomas Sadoski, everybody, let's hear it.